You think you're in control of your desires. You believe your thoughts are yours. You assume your impulses are natural, harmless, just part of being human. But what if the very thing you treat as normal is slowly hollowing you out from the inside? What if the pleasure you chase in silence is quietly eroding your strength, your clarity, and the core of who you are? Most people never notice it happening. That is precisely why it is so dangerous. Lust does not arrive as a monster. It does not announce itself as a threat. It disguises itself as relief, as comfort, as reward. It whispers that you deserve it, that you've had a hard day, that it's natural, that everyone does it. And slowly, almost invisibly, it begins to shape the architecture of your mind. Carl Jung understood something that most people still refuse to face. The mind is not as unified as you think. You are not a single, solid will. You are a battlefield of instincts, memories, archetypes, and unconscious forces that constantly pull at each other. Lust, in Jung's view, is not just a habit or a moral weakness. It is a psychological complex, a cluster of emotions, fantasies, and compulsions that begin to live a life of their own inside you. Here is the uncomfortable question. If you are truly free, why is it so hard to stop? If it is just pleasure, why does it feel like something you need? Why does the urge come back stronger when you try to ignore it? And why does satisfaction fade so quickly, leaving behind emptiness, irritation, or even shame? Jung didn't see lust as evil, but he saw it as dangerous when it becomes unconscious. When desire is no longer guided by awareness or meaning, it turns mechanical. You stop choosing pleasure. The pleasure starts choosing you. It dictates your thoughts, your routines, your expectations. It starts to influence the way you see other people, not as souls, but as objects connected to your hunger. The tragedy is that this doesn't feel dramatic at first. It feels normal, it feels private, it feels justified. That is how psychological possession begins, not with fire and chaos, but with repetition, with ritual, with secrecy, with a growing dependency that no one else can see, not even you. Most people think destruction looks loud. They imagine it as collapse, crisis, scandal. Jung warned that real destruction is often quiet. It happens in bedrooms, in locked bathrooms, in glowing screens late at night, in the subtle shift of your attention away from meaning and toward sensation. Your soul does not scream while it is being weakened. It slowly goes silent. And the most terrifying part? You will still look functional on the outside. You will still work, still laugh, still talk, still scroll, still smile. While inside, your will becomes softer, your discipline weaker, and your inner world more chaotic. You don't become a monster. You become divided. Jung believed that what you cannot control consciously will control you unconsciously. And lust thrives in that darkness. It grows not because you are weak, but because you are unaware. Because you have never been taught how to relate to desire without being swallowed by it. So here is the real question you must face. Are your desires serving your life, or are they quietly rewriting it while you sleep? Are you using pleasure consciously, or is pleasure using you to keep you distracted, dull, and disconnected from your deeper purpose? Most people never ask themselves this. That is why most people never escape it. And if this makes you uncomfortable, that's not a coincidence. It means something inside you recognizes the truth. But this is only the surface. There is a deeper psychological mechanism at work, one that Jung warned about, and one that you may already be trapped inside without realizing it at all. Before we go further, take a moment to imagine what your life would look like if your mind was truly clear, your will truly strong, and your desires truly under your control. That version of you exists, but it cannot survive in the presence of unchecked lust. If this kind of content challenges the way you see yourself and the world, subscribe to the channel and stay with this journey. What you're about to learn next may completely change how you understand your own mind. Most people assume lust is simply about sex, a bodily urge, a physical release, but Jung saw something far more dangerous in it. He saw that lust, when left unconscious, becomes a replacement for meaning, a substitute for purpose, a drug for spiritual emptiness. This is where people get it wrong. They think the problem is morality, rules, religion, shame. But Jung's concern was psychological, not moral. He believed that when a human being lacks a deep connection to meaning, the psyche will search for intensity instead. If you don't have depth, you will chase stimulation, and few forms of stimulation are as powerful, as immediate, and as addictive as lust. That is why it grows stronger the more empty a person feels. That is why it becomes more compulsive during loneliness, boredom, anxiety, or despair. Lust becomes a coping mechanism, not because you are broken, but because your soul is starving for something higher and cannot find it. Here is the dangerous illusion. Lust feels like power. It feels alive. It feels intense. For a few moments, it makes you forget your fears, your doubts, your sense of insignificance. It offers instant relief, instant pleasure, instant escape. But it never builds anything. It never gives you real strength. It only gives you the illusion of being full while slowly deepening the inner void. Jung warned that whatever we use to escape ourselves eventually becomes our cage, and lust is one of the most seductive cages the mind can build. Not because it is evil, but because it is effective. It works, it numbs, it distracts, it hypnotizes, and anything that works too well without requiring effort always has a hidden cost. Ask yourself something brutally honest. When you give in, do you feel stronger afterward? Clearer, more alive, or do you feel slightly drained, slightly empty, slightly ashamed? Maybe not always consciously, but the feeling is there, buried under excuses and rationalizations. That feeling is the soul protesting. Jung spoke often about the danger of living a one-sided life. When a person lives only for pleasure and comfort, the unconscious begins to rebel. It sends anxiety. It sends depression. It sends compulsions, not to punish you, but to awaken you, to show you that something essential is missing. Lust becomes destructive not because of how intense it is, but because of how one-dimensional it makes you. You stop growing. You stop building character. You stop confronting your fears. Why would you when you can escape them instantly? The lower nature always offers the easiest path. That's why so many brilliant, talented, intelligent people live far below their potential. Not because they lack intelligence, but because their nervous system has been trained to choose comfort over conquest, release over resilience, stimulation over self-mastery. Jung believed the human being is meant to individuate, to become whole, integrated, conscious. But lust pulls you in the opposite direction. It fragments you, it splits you, it turns you into someone who thinks one thing, says another, and secretly lives a third. A divided man is a weak man, even if he appears strong. Every time you chase pleasure instead of purpose, you reinforce a psychological pattern. I cannot endure discomfort, and that belief slowly infects everything: your relationships, your work, your discipline, your spiritual life, your self-respect, and the worst part. You don't notice when it happens. It doesn't feel like collapse, it feels like normality. But internally, your soul begins to shrink. You become less patient, less focused, less capable of stillness, less tolerant of silence. You start to crave noise, images, stimulation, distraction. A mind that cannot sit still is a mind that is running from itself. Jung would say, what you run from does not disappear. It goes into the unconscious, and from there, it directs your life without your consent. There is a moment in every man's life when he must face a devastating question. Am I living consciously, or am I simply reacting to impulses I barely understand? Jung believed this question was not philosophical. It was survival. Because the person who cannot master his inner world will always be controlled by it. Lust becomes most dangerous when it stops feeling like a choice, when it becomes a reflex, a ritual, a secret routine you return to without thinking. At that point, it has moved from desire to domination, and domination never announces itself loudly. It hides inside habit. The mind learns through repetition. Every time you give in, you carve a deeper psychological pathway, that makes the next time easier, faster, more automatic. Jung understood that the psyche forms grooves, much like water erodes stone, not through force, but through persistence. That is why breaking free feels almost impossible, because you are not fighting a single urge, but a well-worn identity. You don't just do it. You have become the person who does it. That is the real spiritual danger Jung warned about, unconscious identification. When you stop seeing lust as something you experience and start seeing it as something you simply are. This is just me. This is how I relax. This is normal. The chain is strongest when you stop seeing it as a chain. Many people try to fight lust with shame, with self-hatred, with anger. Jung would call that a mistake. You cannot conquer a force in the psyche by beating yourself. That only drives it deeper into secrecy, where it becomes more autonomous, more powerful, more distorted. The goal is not to destroy desire. The goal is to bring it into consciousness. That is the crucial Jungian insight most people miss. What is made conscious loses its demonic power. What remains unconscious becomes fate. When you observe your impulses without immediately obeying them, something changes. You create distance, you create awareness, you become a witness instead of a slave. And that small distance is the birthplace of freedom. But this process is uncomfortable, painfully uncomfortable, because as soon as you stop escaping through pleasure, everything you've been avoiding begins to surface. Loneliness, fear, insecurity, meaninglessness, old wounds, old regrets. The mind used lust as anesthesia, and when the anesthesia fades, the pain returns. This is why most people never quit, not because they are weak, but because the truth hurts. Jung never promised peace without pain. He promised wholeness through confrontation. He believed that a man's dignity is born the moment he stops running from his own depth, when he finally turns around and faces what he's been avoiding. Lust is not the deepest problem. It is the symptom. The real battle is between the part of you that wants comfort and the part of you that wants meaning. Comfort wants you asleep. Meaning wants you awake. And you cannot serve both. There is a silent war happening inside you every single day. One voice whispers, just escape. Just feel good. Just forget. Another whispers, rise. Endure. Become. Jung believed your entire psychological destiny depends on which voice you listen to consistently. Most people lose not because they didn't fight, but because they never realized they were in a war. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And once you cannot unsee it, you have a responsibility. Responsibility to your future self, to your potential, to the person you could become if you stop negotiating with weakness. The terrifying truth? You can rationalize away your strength for years without noticing. You can trade your future for comfort in tiny, invisible decisions no one else ever sees, but your soul sees. It remembers who you were meant to be, and that memory hurts. If this is changing how you think about yourself, subscribe to the channel and stay here. Because the final part is not about fear, it's about the way out, and it is more real than you think. If lust were just a bad habit, this story would be simple. You would just stop. You would just distract yourself. You would just be stronger. But Jung knew that the psyche does not change through force alone. It changes through meaning. The reason pure willpower eventually fails is because the unconscious does not respond to commands. It responds to symbols, direction, and purpose. You cannot simply delete a force as ancient as desire. You have to give it a higher destination. Jung believed that energy in the psyche is neutral. It is not good or evil. It becomes destructive only when it has nowhere meaningful to go. A river that flows with direction gives life. A river that floods without structure destroys everything. Lust destroys you when it has no purpose beyond itself. So how do you begin to reverse this? Not by suppressing desire, but by elevating the reason you exist. When a man does not have a vision for his life, lust becomes the vision. When a man has no mission, pleasure becomes the mission. When a man has no inner fire, sensation becomes the flame. The cure is not less desire. The cure is more purpose. Jung believed that wholeness is created when the conscious mind and the unconscious move in the same direction, when your instincts are no longer enemies but energies working towards something meaningful. That happens when you start asking better questions, not when you punish yourself. Who could you become if you mastered this part of yourself? What would your relationships feel like if you were not secretly divided? What would your mind feel like if it was no longer addicted to escape? These are not fantasies, they are possibilities. But they cost you something, they cost you comfort, they cost you excuses, they cost you denial. There comes a moment when a man must decide if he wants to be ruled by his lower impulses or shaped by a higher calling. Jung believed that this moment defines not just a life but a soul. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to become a monk. You don't have to hate your own body. You only have to become conscious. Because the unconscious man is not sinful, he is asleep. And sleep is the real danger. Most people die without ever fully waking up. They lived, they desired, they consumed, but they never became. You still have time. You still have a chance to interrupt the pattern, to step out of the trance, to reclaim your will. Not through force, but through awareness and direction. You are not broken, you are not disgusting, you are not hopeless. You are powerful, but only if you decide to be. Jung believed that the soul wants wholeness, not pleasure. It wants meaning, not numbness. It wants depth, not distraction. And everything in you that feels restless, dissatisfied, and discontent is not your enemy. It is your inner call to rise. Now, if this message brought clarity to your mind and strength to your spirit, subscribe to the channel. You're not here by accident, and you didn't listen to this by chance. More truth is coming, and you are ready for it.